Hello, Coolman229 here with another Topic of the Week video. This week I'll be talking about the Disney Pixar movie, The Incredibles. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr user GalloChip19, and their topic is... Hey Coolman229, I've got another topic for you. It's about The Incredibles movie. I watched the movie when I was a kid and thought it was just an ordinary movie with just some awesome action, and I loved it. Now that I'm older, I've heard that the movie was more than meets the eye, so I watched it again recently. To my surprise, it was really well written. It was a true family story. It addressed parenting, fitting in at school, asking a boy out, etc. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it being a movie for families and how well it was written, and, if possible, what you think the sequel will be about. So, I'm probably going to disappoint people when I say that it's not one of my top Pixar movies. I probably wouldn't even put it in my top 5. I have a very complicated, relationship with the Incredibles movie. You see, as a kid, I was like, I don't know, when did that movie come out? 2003 or something? I was a kid when that movie came out, so, I don't remember exactly when, but it's been a while. It's been a good while. 2003, 2004, around that time. But, you see, when I first watched it, I loved it. You know, it's got a lot of action, superhero stuff, James Bond influences. What's not to love? But, as I got older and I watched it more and I started getting into other stuff, my opinion of the movie dropped. Especially once I started understanding things in the movie. Now I know a lot of people... I know this movie has a lot of hardcore fans, and trust me, I still enjoy the movie, but I just don't enjoy it as much as I used to. You see, one thing that really got me, that basically almost totally killed my interest in the movie for a while, was discovering that it was heavily inspired by Watchmen. And I don't even need to hear it say that it's inspired by Watchmen, because more or less, yeah, it's pretty obvious. And I hated Watchmen. I saw the movie, and it was one of the worst things I've ever seen. Watchmen was terrible. And it basically made me feel ashamed to enjoy superheroes. Now, Incredibles isn't that bad. It basically took one of the concepts of, you know, in Watchmen, and basically said, what if it didn't suck that much? But the concept is still dumb. One of the biggest problems I have with The Incredibles is the whole idea that, you know, the superheroes, oh no, you're causing so much damage, and therefore you all have to go into hiding. And then, that's like one of the core, you know, parts of the story. That's what the whole beginning really leads up to. And that part, I mean, I just went with it when I was a kid, but when I got older, I started thinking, wait a minute, this makes no sense. Like, okay, so the guy sued Mr. Incredible, the guy who was trying to commit suicide, sued him because he saved his life and ended up with an injured neck. So I want to know, in what world am I supposed to take that seriously? It's like, what judge looks at a guy who's trying to commit suicide and is suing because he didn't get to die? I mean, I don't know what the laws are in the Incredibles universe, but do you think someone would look at that and go, you're an idiot? Or would they go, yeah, you know, Mr. Incredible, you're a terrible person for saving this man's life. He got hurt. Oh, and then the whole thing of, oh, well, the subway people, or the train car people sued him too. And they all would have died had Bon Voyage, because Bon Voyage's bomb blew up part of the track. Do you think they would, that's so frustrating to me. And it's like, it seems like such an insane thing, because Mr. Incredible did nothing wrong. And okay, maybe that was kind of the point. Maybe that, you know, the fact that he was, sure, he caused damage when he was saving people, but then he's saving hundreds of people at a time while still, you know, causing as minimal damage to the city as possible. But it gets, the older I've gotten, the more infuriated I get at that. Just because, holy crap, it's like, okay, yeah, it's only part of the movie, but it leads to one of the it's basically the core, not the core, but it's the foundation for the overall plot. They're all forcibly retired. And I mean, I guess this wouldn't be as bad, but it feels like if you watch the Avengers movie, if the movie ended up with the Avengers being sued for causing damage to the city when they saved the entire city from being nuked, but it doesn't really make as much sense. No, if they portrayed it more like Superman and Man of Steel, where his carelessness and basically his inexperience basically caused about 50% of Metropolis to be totally decimated, and hundreds, or thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people were killed in that. Okay, all right, I'd buy that, but it just doesn't feel that believable. I mean, the whole family aspect of it is great, and I will say that's probably the best part of the movie. You see this real interactions, you see the real strain that a lot of these relationships have. Like, Bob and Helen's relationship is... You see that Bob is basically in a funk. He's working a desk job when he's a superhero. For Pete's sake, he wants to go out and help people, save the world. It's like, and now he's stuck because a bunch of bureaucrats decided that he was just too much of a liability. And yeah, I mean, that's understandable. And that part of the plot, like everything leading up to Bob becoming Mr. Incredible again, and going to Syndrome's Island, and that stuff, that's just fine. It's like the setup for it just infuriates me, and all that stuff reminds me too much of Watchmen. And another thing that really bothered me about the movie was, honestly, it's really one scene, and if that was altered or taken out, I wouldn't have as much of a problem. It was a whole scene where Edna Mode is talking about the heroes having capes, and it didn't hit me at first, but then I saw a lot of people talking about how this is supposed to be saying, oh yeah, this is basically talking about all these heroes who died. And you have a good 8 heroes died, like in horribly, sometimes horribly cruel deaths because they wore a cape. And I never, when I was younger, I never got that because the whole scene is played for a joke. So I had assumed that because Bob is laughing, going, ha ha ha, what a knucklehead, he wouldn't be talking about one of his friends strangling himself to death. And I have heard some people tell me that that's not what it's implying, that it is implying that they just got hurt. And, I mean, when Stratigal gets sucked into a jet plane engine, I sure as hell hope she survived. Especially when I looked it up, and she's like supposed to be like 15 or something, 15 or 16. She was a young hero. And that, I mean, just the thought that that's all supposed to be them dying is infuriating. Like, it really freaking pisses me off. Because, okay, the heroes who died fighting Syndrome's drones, his robot, that's part of the plot. That's... Okay, that is played as straight up tragedy. You see when Bob is going through and he's looking at these heroes, even if it's only a handful of the possibly dozens and dozens of heroes out there, he says he's seeing there and he's seeing his friends listed dead, 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 and he's just like, oh God, no. And that's fine. But the whole cape sequence, like, I can't watch that. I have to, when I watch that movie, I have to say, they're just hurt. And it was a dumb choice to have a cape. Just like that, that's the only way that makes sense. And yes, ultimately, that joke was, that scene was meant to set up Syndrome's failing because he gets sucked into his own jet engine with the cape, which always bothered me. Like, I know Disney's had a lot of violent villain deaths, but that just seemed a little much. And there's so much of this movie that just feels like it's trying to play to a more edgy audience. And most of the movie isn't like a good 90-95% of the movie isn't like that. That is the action, the family drama, the personal character arc that Bob goes through with basically wanting to relive his glory days and understanding that, and they all come, understanding that he can't just do this alone and that they come together as a family. I mean, And it pisses me off because there's comparatively little of this movie that I dislike. But it bothers me because it really does bother me. And I'm sure a lot of people will be upset when I say that, but it makes the movie rank fairly low for me in terms of Pixar movies. Now, it's not as low as a boring movie like Brave or the atrocity that was Cars 2. Those movies are far lower. But Incredibles it makes the movie feel a little more middling to me. And it's really disappointing because had those few things been altered, the setup for the movie, and, being clear that those other heroes with the cape incidents didn't die, but were just, hurt and learned their lesson. If those things were done like that, I wouldn't have an issue with the movie. I would really enjoy it because there is so much to enjoy. The movie has a very intelligent, way, and it deals with a lot of, adult things. I mean, hell. I know I was watching the interviews and commentary, and they said they wanted to imply, they wanted Helen to confront Bob because she thinks that he's cheating on her. But they couldn't get away with her saying, "Are you having an affair?" So they did it in a really subtle way where she sees his suit, she's cleaning and she sees his suit and it's got like a blonde hair on it. And she's like, where did this come from? And of course it's from Mirage. And so much of the movie feels raw. And I like that. It feels like it's doing a lot of the dark and realistic stuff well. In a lot of ways, this does feel like a deconstruction, in some ways a proper deconstruction of the superhero genre. What if superheroes really did have to live these normal lives? And you see Bob and Frozone. I can't remember if they actually said his real name, but when you see them out going, trying to see people from a burning building, stopping a robbery, because they want their heroes. That's who they're meant to be. And seeing that, and then seeing the family drama, seeing the kids and their powers, and they're basically struggling not to use their powers, like Dash. Like Dash's flashlight power, like he's a speedster. And you can tell that he's born to do more than just sit around on his butt and not doing anything. And I almost forgot another issue I have with the movie was wait, I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, let me talk about the family. The movie really focuses heavily on Bob's family, and you see how this whole thing affects them. You see that, Violet is extremely introverted. And then you see, Helen basically has more or less adapted to the family life while Bob has not. And I remember what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so another problem I have with the movie is the whole, so superheroes are outlawed, basically. And they're forced to go into hiding. Assisted by the government, naturally, but what happened to the supervillains? No, really, what happened to them? Bon Voyage was still on the run. And, it implies that there are other, supervillains, and, okay, what about all of them? Are you telling me that the second heroes are outlawed, all villains will disappear? Because that's so absurd. Okay, there's this idea in comics that, sometimes the heroes create their villains, and the very presence of a hero causes people to want to become villains. I never liked that idea. I always thought it was dumb. Especially when you try to tie it to Batman. But that was a big plot hole, because this isn't mentioned again. I was like, are you telling me that Bon Voyage just stopped committing crime? He saw the heroes were gone, like, curses. I wanted to fight those villains. I wanted to fight them in, those heroes and be a villain. But I guess since they are all living civilian lives, I will go become a banker, just like my father. Like, okay, what happens? What about all the villains? you know, like, you can't tell me that Syndrome is the only person who's decided to do anything villainous. And that, to me, was a massive plot hole and a huge oversight. Which also comes again with the fact that the setup of the movie, the foundation of the plot, is flawed. And just... It's painful. It's one of those things where it's just like... The older I get, the more I looked in, studied narratives and became more well versed in tropes and how stories work, and the logical progression of stories. It's like stuff like this just sticks out at me like a sore thumb, and it bothers me. It's like you could have made this movie probably one of the best Pixar movies ever, but you bugged it up because of this honestly simple mistakes. But yeah, I mean, the whole, all the personal, human drama, wanting to relive the glory days, being basically a middle-aged man, a father, and, being a former hero, and even just taking out the hero, just a man going through basically a midlife crisis, and wanting not to have his life wasted. That he's sitting at a job he hates, making middling amount of money, and then, he wants more. A wife who thinks her husband could be cheating on her, despite the fact that everything about him has, been improving. He's gotten in shape. He's much more loving to her, and and you see that from the beginning of the movie. He's just kind of almost in a daze for the most of his life and running on autopilot. But then you see once he starts working out, once he gets back into the hero stuff, he's much more loving to Helen. He's, much more happy with the kids. He's playing with them more. He's playing, football with Dash. And it's and you see he has a better life, but then, this possibility that what if he is cheating on his wife? And it's and of course we know that he's not, but Helen doesn't because she's kept in the dark for all this stuff. I mean, the idea that, there was that one of their old friends is a fashion designer who designed superhero costumes. I like that idea. You see, this is some of the stuff that's proper deconstruction. What effects would these things have? What would it take for these things to actually happen? And we don't just accept they all have superhero costumes. Oh no, they actually had a professional fashion designer who built super strong materials custom tailored to each hero. That's cool. And honestly, the whole thing where she's basically discussing the different materials and what they can do, and this stuff that's neat. That's cool. When we see the demonstration for the the Incredibles family line that Edna does for Helen, that stuff is cool. I like that. And you see that she's a recluse, and of course, very much inspired by fashion designers, weird fashion designers. But when you see these characters who struggle with the idea that, some of them struggle with the idea that they're not being heroes anymore. And you see that on all the heroes who went and fought Syndrome's robot and died, when you see Bob see all these people, you see they felt the same way. It doesn't even have to explain that. That was great writing right there. It's there's a lot of stuff in the movie that's not explained, but it's still very clear. I mean, you can see that Helen thinks that Bob is cheating on her. It's something that would fly over a lot of kids like it did for me, but when you get older, you recognize those things. And when I say I have a complicated relationship with this movie, I mean that as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate some parts of it, but then other parts I've grown distasteful towards. And I can watch this movie, and I'm not saying that the parts that I hate make it impossible for me to watch it, because it doesn't. I actually still do enjoy the movie. There's a lot of good stuff in this movie. It's just a couple bad things that really bother me. I mean, the overall writing of this movie is great, and I mean a lot of the moments between the Parr family, you really do see, a lot of great emotional drama going on between them. Violet worried about her parents' marriage, which I'm sure a lot of kids have felt, even if there's nothing actually wrong or everything works out, that fear that the parents would divorce. You see Dash's lackadaisical attitude because he's younger, because he doesn't really see that. You see, like the one of my favorite parts in the movie is near the end of the movie when the conversation between Bob and Helen, when he basically wants her to stay with the kids, and she's like, no, we're both heroes here, I'm going, and he's telling her no, and she thinks he's saying it because he doesn't think highly of her, and he's like, no, I don't want to lose you. And because he thought he lost her because Syndrome blew up their plane. No, his family survived, but he thought he hit rock bottom. He hit absolute rock bottom, and he was almost going to kill Mirage. He was going to try to kill Syndrome. And seeing that is proper darkness. If you want to include darkness in a story, include that. A man thinks that he's lost his family. He sees the man who shot down the plane that his family was on, his wife and his two of his kids. And he's about to snap, and he tries to kill him, and then Mirage jumps in and saves Syndrome, and he grabs her and he's threatening to kill Mirage. And then Syndrome's like, alright, go ahead. But Bob can't do it because he's not evil. He's not a horrible person. He is at his core a born and bred hero. And no matter how far he gets pushed, he will not cross that line and become just a cold-blooded killer. Even though you could probably imply that some of the goons get killed, but some of them do get killed. But with Bob, I don't know. I'd have to rewatch the movie again to see that, but but the point of that is that that's a line that Bob would not cross, no matter how far he's pushed. Even losing his family would not cause him to become a cold-blooded killer. And you see, that right there, it was a tense moment, because you're watching it, you think, even just for a second, he might do it. That right there is good darkness, and that's stuff you need, and that's stuff that this movie does have. It just have a few things that are too dark, and are just superfluous to the story. And it's like, there's so much I like about this movie. And okay, let me be a little more positive, because I feel like I've been a bit of a downer in this video. The characters are all really fun, and I like seeing their powers, and you can see a lot of clear inspiration from them from classic heroes. The Flash, the Invisible Woman, Mr. Fantastic. You see a lot, or even Frozen with Iceman, and you can see a lot of these inspirations come from very classic heroes, and it's fun. As a fan of comic books and a fan of superheroes in general, I do appreciate that. I do like a lot of that. I feel like, and I love the aesthetic of I think it's the 70s. I like how it takes that and just runs with it. You have a lot of these futuristic aesthetics, but it's got mixed with the sort of retro feel to it. I mean, honestly, for the longest time, as a kid, I didn't quite understand what time period this was set in. But growing up, you start recognizing stuff like, oh, yeah, and I do understand, I know what Gallowship is saying. There's a lot of stuff that when you're younger, you don't really understand, and this happens with a lot of kid movies. I mean, I sure as hell didn't get any of the stuff that was going on in The Hunchback of Notre Dame until I watched that recently, and oh boy, there's a lot going on in that movie. But yeah, I understand what they're talking about, because there's so much to really appreciate about this movie growing up. And you start appreciating just the intricacies, and even the great writing of subtle moments. That it doesn't have to go out and have Helen say, "Bob, are you having an affair?" It just has to show that she's suspicious, and she has this uneasy feeling throughout the movie until she totally finds out the truth. Especially when Mirage frees Mr. Incredible and he hugs her, and then Helen walks in right there and she's like, "You blonde bimbo." There's a lot of great humor in the movie too. I mean, it's overall fun. It's a lot of fun action. A lot of tongue-in-cheek moments, a lot of, jokes about heroes. I mean, one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie is when when Helen is, sneaking through Syndrome's base, and, her leg gets caught in a door. Of course, she's rubbery, so it's like, entraps her, and she's like, darn. So she's like stretching, and then she gets caught by another door. And you see all these shenanigans that are going around. The guy sees the leg sticking out, and then you see those two guys on the little cart, and they get clotheslined by Helen's torso that's stretched over about 20 feet, and you see her like trying to grab that guy in the elevator, and these little tongue-in-cheek moments about their powers. Or, and you see a lot of that stuff interesting, and a lot of these things are deconstructions. Proper deconstructions, because I could do a whole video just talking about deconstructions. But, what a proper deconstruction is, but it does a lot of that by, going into what would it take to, what shenanigans would this really lead to? How would this stuff happen? How would real human beings react in these situations? Not just, superhero characters. So, yeah, a lot of this movie is really good, and I do very much enjoy it. Now, I mean, except for those few parts that I said I don't like, and they just kind of sour the movie for me. But overall, I do enjoy the movie, and if the movie is on, I will watch it. And if someone wants to put it on, I'd be okay with that. Now, for the sequel, I honestly don't really have any ideas about the sequel. I mean, it really depends on when they want to set it. Do they want to set it immediately after the first movie? Maybe fighting the Underminer, or have it start with them defeating the Underminer, or where are they going to go with the story? And there are a lot of ways that they could go with this. They could really delve into the whole government agency involved in the superhero work. They could show villains coming back. If there's one thing I really want to see, I want to see a bunch of heroes gathering up together, and I want to see the heroes fight. I want to see them relive the glory days. You see all these heroes that are in their 40s or something coming back, and they're like, "Bob, looking good," and it's just like, oh, and I want to see Helen and Bob and Frozone interact with them. And dude, that's something I really want to see, and I think that should be at a core of this, rejoining, and we're heroes again, and we're gonna fight the bad guys. And now, I don't really know what threat that they would have. I mean, I would like to think that some villains would come back, or some other villains taking up the mantle. Maybe another guy takes up the mantle of Bon Voyage or something, and you have legacy villains, or maybe even legacy heroes. Maybe some of these heroes' kids come in, and they are, they're taking up the mantle of, one of their parents. Like, what if, sort of a emotional thing, but what if Gazerbeam had a kid, and he comes in and he takes up the mantle as the new Gazerbeam? It's stuff like that. I mean, I want to see a lot of that done. And if there's, it's sort of retroactively fixing something. I would like for them just to show some of the villains that had capes in the no cape sequence come back. Just anything to not even say, just imply that they didn't die, because that always never sat well with me. But now there's a whole lot that you can do with it, and I'd probably have to sit and talk with someone about it to really kind of figure out what I'd want to do. But to be honest, I don't really like to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff or come up with my own ideas until I until I feel like I need to. Because there's a difference between speculation and actually coming up with my own ideas. Because oftentimes I do end up preferring my own ideas, naturally, because they're the ideas that I came up with, and I like those. But frankly, I'm just kind of waiting to see what we get with The Incredibles 2, and I'm just glad we're getting a sequel, because if there's any Pixar movie that deserved to have a sequel, it's The Incredibles, part of a superhero movie, about a superhero family, and there's all this world that they could explore in it, and I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more heroes and stuff, and that's really mainly what I want it to be. I want it to be about a bunch of old heroes coming together and seeing the new generation. It could be maybe a few years later, and after heroes have sort of gotten acclimated back to being heroes again, and maybe we see Dash and Violet coming into their own as heroes. Maybe them wanting more uniqueness and freedom rather than being part of the Incredible family. And maybe them want to strike it on their own. There's a lot that you can do with this, and it's rife with potential. So, yeah, that's a lot. I think I've said plenty about this topic. I think I pretty much said all I could say without starting to repeat myself. So, yeah. If you I want to hear what some of you guys think. I know a lot of people love The Incredibles. Do you love The Incredibles? Were there issues you had with the movie? Do you agree with the issues that I had, or do you disagree? And I would like to hear what y'all think, because I do think this is an interesting conversation to have, and really, the differing perspectives can start a really interesting conversation. If you want to submit a topic, just comment below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic colon and whatever topic you want me to talk about, and then just make sure to follow the rules that will be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, which is topic 100, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. And thank you for watching.